The night was supposed to be mine, a quiet celebration with candles. Friends and family gathered around the table. But instead, my sister Lauren stood with her hand pressed to a small curve in her belly. My husband's hand resting smugly on her shoulder. "We're a family now," she said, her words aimed like daggers. Every eye turned to me, waiting for the tears, the collapse, the scene they were sure I'd make. But I didn't break. I sipped my Pinot Noir, let the silence stretch, then raised my glass with a steady smile. They thought they owned the moment. What they didn't know was that I had already written the script, and the truth was about to rewrite theirs. Growing up, the lines were drawn early in my family. Even if no one admitted it out loud. My sister Lauren was the golden child, dazzling with just enough charm to get away with everything. When she wanted the $1,000 princess dress for prom, my parents cashed in a savings bond without blinking. When I asked for help with a textbook in an honors class, I got a lecture about responsibility and the value of part-time jobs. That moment summed up the unspoken rule: Lauren was worth the investment. While I was expected to be self-sufficient, that pattern never changed. It only grew sharper as we got older. I became the one who showed up when the furnace broke, when the taxes piled up, when the car needed insurance. I wired money, made phone calls, cleared hurdles. To them, my reliability was a resource, not a gift. They called me steady, strong, dependable, words that sound flattering until you realize they are just excuses for forgetting you deserve gratitude. I was the invisible backbone, and in their eyes, that meant I didn't need acknowledgement. Mark, my husband, learned to play into that same pattern. In the early years of our marriage, he saw how often I smoothed over family problems, how I carried burdens without complaint, and he mirrored it back with a smile that masked his opportunism. When we began trying for a baby, the dynamic twisted even further. I wanted children desperately, and after months of pleading, Mark finally agreed to be tested. He went alone to Northwood Clinic, came home that night, and put on the performance of a lifetime. He held me in his arms while I cried, stroking my hair with manufactured tenderness. "It's not me," he whispered. "The doctor said I'm fine. It must be you." That single sentence became the heaviest chain I'd ever worn. For a year, I lived under the crushing weight of believing I was broken. I buried myself in work, in errands, in being useful to everyone around me. Because usefulness was the only currency I thought I had left. Every quiet sacrifice, every bill paid, every grocery run, every late-night phone call solved, was my way of proving that if I couldn't give life, at least I could give stability. But reliability is a tax you never stop paying once people realize you'll never default. My parents leaned on me for mortgages, insurance renewals, prescriptions. Lauren leaned on me for just a little help until her music took off. Mark leaned on me emotionally, financially, and psychologically, feeding me the lie that I was the problem in our marriage. None of them ever said thank you. Instead, they said, "You've always done well." Translation: you don't get to want more. The truth, I later discovered, had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for me to trip over it. The shared family iPad, a casual household tool for recipes and bills, became the doorway to reality. One careless email notification opened a world of betrayal. Lauren's messages to Mark didn't just detail their affair. They laid out a strategy to use my own birthday dinner as a stage for my humiliation. And even worse, they relied on the assumption that I would do exactly what I had always done: fold under the weight of someone else's needs, stay silent, and let them take what they wanted. That assumption was their biggest mistake. Because alongside the affair, I also uncovered another document, Mark's medical records from Northwood Clinic, where he had told me, "It must be you." The records instead showed zero sperm motility, a condition called azoospermia. In other words, sterile. He hadn't just betrayed me with my sister. He had forced me to carry a lie that wasn't mine to carry. The cruelty wasn't just in the cheating. It was in the gaslighting that rewrote my body as defective while his secret sat in a file. Notarized, undeniable. Looking back, I realized the setup was never just about favoritism or neglect. It was about power. My parents gave Lauren the stage. Mark gave himself the script. And I, for too long, accepted the role of silent supporter. But that night at the birthday dinner, when Lauren's hand rested on her stomach and Mark's hand rested on her shoulder, I knew something they didn't. The real story wasn't theirs to tell anymore. For anyone listening, take this lesson. Loyalty without boundaries becomes a cage. And silence in the face of manipulation only feeds the manipulators. If you ever find yourself in a similar place, remember, always request copies of any medical results you're named on. Always verify payments against your own bank statements. Trust, but audit, because sometimes the smallest record, tucked away in an iPad folder or a clinic file, is the key that frees you from years of invisible captivity. The email subject line was only 2 words, but it detonated my entire reality, our plan. 6 weeks before my birthday, I tapped the family iPad to search for a recipe, only to see that notification sitting bold on the screen. My heart dropped. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside, Lauren and Mark had spelled it out like it was a business strategy. They would announce her pregnancy at my birthday dinner, humiliate me in front of everyone, and push me into a fast, quiet divorce. She'll be too broken to fight back. Lauren wrote, she never fights back. That was the last moment they underestimated me. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the cracked screen of the iPad, and something inside me shifted. I had spent my whole life being the reliable one, the strong one, the quiet one who handled everything. But reliability wasn't going to save me now. Strategy would. If they wanted to play this like a hostile takeover, then fine, I would play it like a boardroom war. The first proof came through persistence. I remembered the fertility test Mark claimed he took at Northwood Clinic a year earlier. The one he used to tell me, "It's not me, Emily, it must be you." For months, I had carried that lie like a stone in my chest, believing I was broken, but I still had the consent forms buried in his old files. His signature in black ink. With a little digging and a lot of calls, I managed to unlock the fortress. The report arrived in my inbox as a PDF. The clinic's seal stamped clearly at the top. I scrolled to the summary line. And there it was. Azoospermia, 0 sperm motility. He wasn't just a cheater. He had built our marriage on a lie that turned me into the scapegoat. I printed 2 copies, slid them into a folder, and stared at the weight of the paper. That wasn't grief anymore. That was evidence. But I wasn't finished. Lies about biology were one thing, but money leaves a louder trail. I combed through our bank statements from the month he supposedly paid thousands for specialist consultations. Not a single dollar went to Northwood. Instead, there was a $20 cash withdrawal. My stomach tightened. Where did it go? I needed more than suspicion, I needed receipts. That's when I hired a private investigator. A quiet man with wire rim glasses who looked more like an accountant than a detective. I didn't ask him to catch Mark in hotel rooms. I didn't need pictures of them kissing in parking lots. I already knew. What I wanted was forensic detail. Numbers. Transfers. Accounts. I don't want tears. I told him. I want timestamps. 2 weeks later, he handed me a report thick with transaction IDs and ACH traces. The $20 had been funneled into a shell account Mark created. From there, the money trickled to Lauren, her rent, her car lease, designer handbags, every dollar a thread in their conspiracy. And then came the kill shot. A single $200 transfer from Mark's corporate expense account, embezzled money, to a title company. The property deed was in my mother's name. My husband hadn't just betrayed me with my sister. He had used stolen company money to buy my mother a house. I sat in my living room. Documents spread across the table like pieces of a trial exhibit. PDFs stamped with clinic seals. Bank statements with highlighted withdrawals. Transaction histories mapping every dollar that had disappeared behind my back. My grief had hardened into something else entirely. Clarity. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a coordinated fraud. And I was done being the invisible casualty of other people's schemes. So I built my own case. I scanned everything into a secure cloud folder. I mirrored my hard drive, backed up to an external locked in my desk. I kept a timeline log. Dates. Quotes. Dollar amounts. Every lie became a bullet point. Every omission a timestamp. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying, I was documenting. The irony wasn't lost on me. They thought I was the fragile one, the woman who couldn't hold it together under pressure. But here I was, building a ledger stronger than any of their lies. Evidence has its own kind of power. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It simply waits for the right moment to surface. Undeniable. Unshakable. When I looked at that folder, medical reports, financial forensics, legal affidavits drafted with the help of my friend Jessica, I knew the truth. They thought they owned the moment. But they had no idea I'd already written the script. The ivory room glowed with soft candlelight. Every glass polished. Every fork perfectly aligned. It was supposed to be my birthday dinner, a quiet celebration of another year survived. Instead, it became the stage for their performance. Lauren rose from her chair, her hand resting theatrically on her belly. Mark's hand perched on her shoulder like a crown. "We're a family now," she announced, her voice loud enough for the whole dining room. The room froze. My friends, my relatives, all stared at me, waiting for the inevitable breakdown. Mark even wore his usual mask of pity, as though I was a fragile thing about to shatter. They thought humiliation would silence me. But humiliation has a way of turning into fuel. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I let the silence stretch until it pressed against the walls. Then, I raised my glass and whispered, "To family, and to the truth." The words puzzled them. They hadn't read the script I'd written in secret. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Sliding it across the polished mahogany table, I said clearly, "That's from Northwood Clinic, dated last year. It says you can't biologically be the father." Mark's face drained of color before he even touched the paper. He didn't need to read it. He already knew. Lauren blinked, her smirk faltering, her hand instinctively pressing her stomach as if that could change the biology printed in black ink. A collective gasp rose from the table. Forks clinked. Someone's phone camera tilted just slightly. Recording. The silence was louder than any outburst. "The biggest lie wasn't you sleeping with my sister," I continued, my voice steady as a metronome. "The biggest lie was you pretending you could ever be a father." Lauren's face collapsed. Whatever glow of victory she had conjured minutes before crumbled under the weight of one line. My mother looked from me to Mark, her lips trembling, searching for words that weren't there. But I wasn't finished. I had promised myself there would be 2 strikes. Not one. I turned toward her, softening my tone in the cruelest way. "And Mom," I said, "that house you love so much? The one with the perfect porch and the title in your name? When Mark's company finishes its fraud review, they'll want the $200 back. Because it wasn't his to give. It was embezzled." The silence cracked into chaos. My mother gasped, clutching her chest as if I'd punched her. Lauren's jaw dropped open, but no sound came out. Mark lunged across the table, rage and panic twisting his face. "You witch," he shouted, reaching for the papers. Before he could touch me, 2 security guards appeared, hauling him back with practiced efficiency. He thrashed, cursed, and shouted my name, but the scene only made him smaller. Guests pulled out their phones, recording the meltdown, ensuring that the truth I carried wouldn't vanish quietly into the night. Lauren sat catatonic, staring down at her own hands like they belonged to someone else. My mother sobbed openly, shaking her head, whispering, "No, no, no," as if denial could undo numbers, seals, and signatures. Around us, the guests gasped, whispered, filmed. Every second of their performance turned inside out. Every ounce of control ripped away. I stood, my wine glass still in hand, steady as stone. Jessica, my best friend, moved to my side, her hand gentle but firm on my back. "It's time," she whispered. I nodded once. My eyes swept the table one last time. The mahogany gleamed beneath the papers I'd laid down, the medical report, the receipts of fraud. It wasn't just a table anymore. It was the stage for truth. I turned toward the heavy oak doors, the hum of chaos behind me rising like static. And as those doors swung shut, muffling the sobs, curses, and gasps, I knew what the sound meant. It wasn't an ending. It was an exit. For them, collapse. For me, freedom. The storm didn't end at that restaurant table. But it lost its power over me the moment those oak doors closed behind my back. What followed was not the explosion they expected, it was the slow, methodical burn of justice. Within weeks, the lawyers had their hands on every piece of evidence I had collected: the clinic report, the bank transfers, the investigator's file. Mark's company, desperate to avoid their scandal becoming a front-page trial, moved quickly. They reached a settlement, quietly, discreetly, the kind that comes with non-disclosure clauses and fat checks. They wanted their dirty laundry folded and locked away, and I was more than willing to let them pay for that silence. The divorce went through faster than anyone predicted. No drawn-out courtroom battles. No endless depositions. He signed away rights and claims because the alternative was worse. For me, it was a clean cut. A mercifully sharp blade instead of the dull, dragging one he and Lauren had planned. 6 months later, a headline lit up my phone while I was elbow-deep in wet clay at a pottery studio. Former finance executive Mark Peterson sentenced to 5 years for embezzlement. There he was in a grainy photo, being led away in cuffs. I stared at it longer than I expected, waiting for the rush of triumph. It never came. No joy, no gloating, just quiet. He was simply a chapter in a book I'd already finished. Lauren disappeared from my life without ceremony. Friends of friends told me she moved out of state. Some whispered she tried to spin the story into sympathy. But the weight of truth always finds a way to anchor liars. My mother never called again. The silence between us became permanent, like a wall that no longer even needed bricks. And me? I had no interest in rebuilding the life they tried to script for me. Instead, I built something new with my own hands, literally. The pottery wheel became my therapy. The clay spinning under my palms a reminder that broken pieces can be reshaped into something stronger. Jessica would laugh beside me, splattering more mud than she molded. And for the first time in years, I laughed too. Not the polite chuckles I'd perfected in family gatherings, but the kind of laugh that shakes loose the last of the bitterness. At home, my small apartment by the lake began to feel like mine. No surveillance of expectations, no unpaid debts hidden as obligations. On the balcony sat an orchid I had rescued from the clearance rack of a garden store. Its petals had been stripped away, its stem bent, but I saw the life still inside it. Weeks passed, then months, and one morning, a single bud appeared. I leaned down, brushing my finger against the fragile green tip, and smiled. For a long time, I thought I was the one who couldn't grow. The one broken by infertility, betrayal, and years of being invisible. But I wasn't broken, I was simply planted in the wrong soil. Freed from their manipulation, I found my roots could finally breathe. When people ask me if I regret exposing them so publicly, my answer is always the same. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with a signature on a settlement, a judge's gavel, or a quiet headline confirming the truth you already knew. And sometimes, justice is simply learning to live without the weight of their lies on your shoulders. I used to believe I was broken, that something in me had failed. But the truth is simpler. I was never broken. I was just planted in the wrong garden. Once I stepped away from the soil of lies and manipulation, I finally began to grow. Justice doesn't always arrive with shouts or courtroom fireworks. Sometimes it moves quietly, echoing through the silence left behind. And that echo is enough. Endings are not weaknesses, they are decisions. And beginnings, however fragile, are the bravest things we can claim for ourselves. Have you ever turned an ambush into a comeback? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your voice when others tried to take it away. And don't forget to subscribe for more true, hard-won victories, plus safe, practical lessons on protecting what you build.